From across time and space and throughout the multiverse, listen as multiple generations of geeks come together to discuss the iconic characters, events, and franchises that make up the very fabric of pop culture as we know it. Let Your Geek Side Show presents Then and Now. Hey guys, this is Kitty.
And Melanie.
And we are coming to you from the Sideshow Studios in Southern California. This week, we are taking a trip to a long, long time ago in a galaxy far away. Yes, I cribbed those from Weird Al Yankovic. Returning to where the Skywalker saga technically begins. This trilogy of Star Wars films is often considered a black sheep of the series, although with further exploration and expansion, the lore that these movies added to the galaxy remains fan-favorite content. Okay, maybe not the midichlorians. These films gave history to some of our favorite characters, and the spin-off materials from this era of the story, including comics, television shows, and more, have forever shaped the way we view the light side and the dark. This is the Star Wars Prequels, Then and Now. All right, thank you for joining me this week, Melanie.
Thanks for having me back.
I'm very excited to discuss a topic that is very polarizing in lots of fandom, but then again, in terms of fandom, what isn't polarizing in any form of media?
You can find polarizing elements everywhere in everything.
Yep, and that's what the Star Wars fandom has in spades with their beautiful little prequel trilogy. The prequels are, just the term, the prequels, carries so much weight to it. Now, funny little anecdote that always just strikes me. I enjoy the prequels. Now, when I tell people that, they gasp and they put their hands to their breasts and they say, "Now, Kitty, you know they're not good movies, right?" And I said, well, yeah, I know they're not good movies, but I can enjoy a bad movie just as much as I can enjoy a good one.
Sometimes the bad movies are even more fun.
Yeah.
I do the same thing because I don't mind the prequels. They're not my favorite thing. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to watch Star Wars lore, I'm probably going Clone Wars or Rebels. Mm-hmm. But I do like them. I enjoy them. I think it lends more to the universe, which in my opinion is never really a bad thing because it's more of the thing I love.
Yeah, and funny you should note, with the animated series, Clone Wars is technically part of the prequels package. I know it did. So there's an interesting distinction because most people, we're talking about the prequels both as the film trilogy, but also that encapsulation of the stories that come from that era. Mm-hmm. So there was, outside of the films, a number of explorations of prequel era concepts, including the Clone Wars, which is one of the most celebrated pieces of Star Wars media to date. I also think a lot of people, whether they don't want to admit or they just go, yeah, okay. The prequel introduced a lot of characters that are really important to a lot of people. I think the number one being Darth Maul.
He's epic. And I was so excited when, spoilers, he showed up again in Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. And I think what I really love about it is in the prequels, like you said, it's a limited scope, but they were able to take these episodes of Clone Wars later and really expand on things and create beautiful, beautiful stories that I think enhance the movies. Mm-hmm. I think opinion on the prequels has changed over the years, not only because the kids who felt ownership of those movies are now grown-ups and can affect the social zeitgeist perception, but also because they've added so much to the universe that the stories that are told in the prequels feel even more poignant because you have more backstory.
Mm-hmm. And I think for no character more so than Anakin Skywalker getting a bit more of a backstory or not backstory, but more of a character arc in the Clone Wars.
Absolutely.
You get to see more from Padme Amidala, who actually is my favorite character in all of Star Wars. I think the concept of her, whether or not the execution on screen has been the best, the concept of the child queen becoming a senator, becoming a freedom fighter in her own way, and then being this tragic figure, she is, and plus she has the best wardrobe in all of the saga. She's just one of my favorite characters. But there is such an interesting, especially because for a lot of films up to that period, people hadn't undertaken a big prequel idea for a massive franchise.
It wasn't heard of.
And so to try to retrofit a story, yes, there's going to be plot holes and it's going to be a crunched timeline as you have to dovetail it with the this guy is going to become Darth Vader and he has 2 children. Like, how did that happen? But the room to breathe through the television and even now comics, especially with Marvel taking on stuff. I know Dark Horse did a lot of extended universe for the original trilogy, and that was also something people really loved. And so I think giving these things time to organically grow and breathe, whether or not the extended universe is now canon because of Disney's acquisition of the Lucasfilm properties, it takes time for the full story to kind of germinate and then spread out. And that's where I think people are having that appreciation for the prequels. Now that we're into the sequel trilogy that is also highly contested. It feels like everything is highly contested when it comes out.
I think that part of it is Return of the Jedi came out in 83.
Mm-hmm.
Phantom Menace came out in 99. So in 1983, everyone thought it was done. Mm-hmm. That's the last we see of these characters. Everyone has ridden into the sunset and we're done with the story. And then 16 years later, they get more of this thing that they love. And it's not necessarily what they expect, what they want. The excitement's not as high because you're not seeing Darth Vader for the first time and you're not 7. And you have different expectations, and sometimes reality doesn't live up to the fantasy.
Yeah.
And because people feel such ownership over these characters and these storylines because it's their childhood, it's devastating to them. I don't think it necessarily gives anyone the right to attack filmmakers or actors or other fans who don't hate the thing that you think wasn't good. But I understand it.
It is very difficult, especially because so many people who grew up with the original trilogy and then they were like, wait, we're getting more Star Wars. The movies weren't necessarily made for their generation. It was a younger generation that now has grown up with the prequels. And even still, we've got a younger generation that's growing up with the sequels and like going to Disneyland and seeing Galaxy's Edge and seeing like a little girl with her like Jedi robe and going like, hi Rey, like that's what's most important. Because also the prequels don't diminish what the original trilogy already put out. Because you can, the best part about fiction is you can pretend that certain parts of canon that you don't like didn't happen. And so yeah, it is interesting. And then when I tell people I enjoy the prequels, people go, well, that's because you grew up with them. And I didn't see the prequels till I was 13 or 14. And I had this grandiose idea to make a Padme costume before I'd ever seen the films. And then, so I watched the prequels first while I was working on the costume to get reference. And of course I chose a costume that she's only wearing for like 30 seconds in one scene. You know how it goes. But I took that to D23 that year. And that was the year that Disney announced, hey, in 2 years, episode 7's coming out. And so like, it was that cool thing and a cool feeling. And I was wearing that costume the day that I went to that panel. And so it was like really cool just being like, I'm wearing something from the prequels and they're announcing another set. And this is the set that I will actually be there for the release of each episode. And so there's something special about that, whether or not it just the idea of being there. Like, this is the one that I'm technically, the sequels are the ones I'm growing up with because that's the ones I'm hitting at the right times for when they're coming out. So it is a very interesting thing of when you were introduced. Maybe it was a family thing. My family didn't watch Star Wars, so that wasn't a thing. And
mine didn't either. I
borrowed the original trilogy discs from a friend who had grown up with Star Wars and had grown up with only the original trilogy. Her parents, they didn't do the prequels just because the original trilogy is what they had. So I borrowed the DVDs, and the DVDs were so scratched that when Empire Strikes Back, I was watching it on my laptop on a trip home from trip on the bus from college, and it stopped at "No, I am." And then it scratched, and the disc was irreparably like unable to watch the last 10, 15 minutes. But it was also so culturally salient of a film that I already knew, where I was like, duh, I know it's his father.
Right.
Like, it was like a picture perfectly record scratch. No, I am your, I'm never going to find out. Yeah, and so it was a very weird experience going through them like that.
And I'm kind of in the same boat as you, where my parents weren't Star Wars people. I was born after the last one came out. But I saw Phantom Menace for the first time in the theater. I saw it with super Star Wars nerd friends.
Mm-hmm.
After the movie, they went down in front of the seats and had a little Star Wars lightsaber battle in the theater. And so that's my Star Wars memory. Those are my movies. And I didn't watch the original trilogy until probably 4 or 5 years after Phantom Menace came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched it on VHS because they had remastered, and you had like the Hayden Christensen Force Ghost. And
the special editions, the oft derided. I think the only one I ever saw that wasn't edited was one of my friends had like the golden edition original trilogy DVD set that was like not edited, and I saw Return of the Jedi unedited. But
I watched it on VHS because I borrowed it from a friend who grew up with the original trilogy and was like, "This is how you watch them. we don't do those things. Here's my VHS," and it was a very nice like box set.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also part of why I liked the prequels just fine, because it wasn't a universe I was more than casually familiar with. Mm-hmm. It was just fun movies with, Roger.
Those are my favorites. I love those droids. And largely, I know that the CGI in some scenes hasn't aged well, but for its time, that was a huge deal. Like, it really was. And you have to look at these things in context. Unfortunately, not all cinematic advancements are going to look good 10, 20 years down the road. Speaking of 20 years, this is the Phantom Menace's 20th anniversary, which is why we are doing this podcast. Happy birthday to you, 1 year away from being able to buy a drink for yourself. I like to measure comic book characters in their time, and it's like, this movie has been around for 20 years. But again, going back to some more of the things that those movies introduced, there are so many enduring concepts. So, of course, we got Darth Maul, which is arguably, I would say, probably everyone's favorite thing that the prequels introduced. And I mean, he had such an arc in the Clone Wars. He even appeared in Solo, a Star Wars story. Super spoilers for anyone who didn't actually go to see that one.
He was also in Rebels, and I went back and watched little bits and pieces of the shows that are my favorite moments. And again, spoilers, the scene with Darth Maul and Obi-Wan on Tatooine in Rebels it's really moving. And I almost cried, watching it just on the phone, at lunch today. Just like, but I don't want him to go away.
Because more than a sci-fi gunslinger western, this is a space opera, and it does have those. It's almost like the ring cycle in the opera. Like, it's just this beautiful cyclical thing, and you do get those. The prequels, a lot of the cinematography and script does mirror the original trilogy, and some people, and they're bringing that concept into the sequels too, but some people go, oh, it's just copying the other thing. It's like, no, there's a cycle. There's cycle to this. Some of the other characters who were introduced in the prequels, Qui-Gon Jinn, who I think a lot of people like, probably just because it's Liam Neeson. I mean, like, who doesn't love Liam Neeson in space? And then you get Jango Fett, Jedi like Kit Fisto and Shaak Ti. You get bounty hunters like Aurra Sing and Cad Bane. And then I think the two biggest other things, apart from Darth Maul, are Ewan McGregor Obi-Wan, who, hello there. He's getting his own TV series on Disney+. But I know she's not prequel movie material, but Ahsoka Tano, I think she warrants. Yeah, you're kitted out. You got your Ahsoka ring from, is that Rock Love?
Yes.
Rock Love Jewelry.
Yep.
I know she's not from the films, and gosh, wouldn't it be great if she shows up in a Disney Plus thing sometime soon? But
I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah.
And I'm so pumped.
But
the thought of it.
So many people love Ahsoka, and she's such a crucial character who came in as a part of Anakin's story, but then had her own life outside of that when she left the Jedi Order. But this kind of character hadn't been seen before as well, and especially in the prequels, where there were a lot of female Jedi who we didn't get to see front and center as much, especially after Order 66. And then we had the female politicians like Padme, and then Queen Jamila, and the other characters who were in that kind of Senate periphery. But this was a female Jedi character that a lot of people could attach to, and then seeing her disenchantment with the Jedi. Imagine being the Padawan who's like, yeah, my master turned into Darth Vader. Like, oh my goodness. But like her journey is also so epic and wouldn't have come had there not been a desire to explore the Clone Wars.
The extended like story building. And that is another thing that Star Wars kind of changed the game on. Prior to the prequels and the tie-in stories and the comic books and the novels and all of that, it wasn't really heard of to have stories that had centralized canon and paid really close attention to continuity. And Star Wars changed that. You know, studios now are investing in worlds and not just a single story. And that started with Star Wars and with the prequels and this Clone Wars and Rebels and the comic books. And I
think it's fascinating that Star Wars has almost done the reverse of that, where they're like, we've invested so much into big worlds that we can also now do standalone stories because so many of these stories were not designed as one-offs, but now we do have solo films. Another thing that they did brilliantly with the Clone Wars series was giving a face and an identity to the endless amounts of clones. And I know the clone troopers and the B-1 battle droids and the big ol' scene in Geonosis and stuff, like those were just kind of there to show the impressiveness of the CGI.
Yes.
But the Clone Wars series was like, hey, no, these, like, who are these people who are being used as cannon fodder for both the Separatists and the Republic? And actually, I get the politics of this time so confused because it's like, no, we don't have the Empire yet, but there is the Confederacy and the no.
Right,
but
the Jedi are on the side of the Republic, but the Republic leaders are actually working with the Separatists, and it is very convoluted.
Yeah, and that's another thing is like, it was less like hero's journey Campbell style. We've got the call to action. This was like a political drama, which they could have played up more aspects of it, but a lot of it did mirror some really cool like real world, like the fall of Rome, events leading to the different world wars, but just like that Roman Republic feel that shows you why we get to it is a period of galactic civil war. Like it kind of is important, and it is kind of cool to explore that and to be able to retrofit that into the story.
Well, and there's that, and you do have some episodes of Clone Wars that are focused on the Senate politics and what
aggressive negotiations.
Yes. And you know, going to a world and having it invaded by separatists because they focus on that, but you also kind of get to see, in addition to what those actions cause politically, how it also affects the Jedi Order and therefore relations between Anakin and Padme and Anakin and Obi-Wan and what the Council is doing. Because I think, and I haven't read anything, I don't know if it's a popular or unpopular opinion, I think the Jedi Council is just as responsible for Anakin's turning as, you know, Emperor Palpatine and Anakin.
You would find a lot of fans who agree with you. I mean, there are a lot of people who are like, the Jedi are the rigid, extreme opposite, but they're not. So he was supposed to bring balance to the Force, but the Jedi were like, oh, the balance means tipping the scales in our favor and eliminating the dark side. But there is, and I hope maybe the sequel films where we got the Rise of Skywalker coming up to close out the saga.
Right, the Skywalker.
Yeah, I hope we get a little bit more explanation of, because until this point, the Force has almost been like an exclusive club where it's like you either want to be the dark side of the Force or the light side, but one side believes that bringing balance to that Force is eliminating the other side, which is not balance. That is
right.
Which is fascinating because, yeah, I think a good number of fans would agree with you. The Jedi aren't as upright as they seem.
Right, they're not necessarily always the good guys.
Yeah, and so screaming at this poor slave child that you're the one who's going to save us. You have to do it. But also then refusing to give him the tools. We're not going to make you a Jedi master. We're going to deny you all this stuff, and but you have to save, and you have to bring balance to the Force by knocking out our foes. That's a lot for a small child from humble beginnings.
Well, especially when I read something that was justifying Anakin's stilted discussion, like lovey-dovey discussions with Padme, where he's a monk essentially. Like he's never interacted with women because he's been in the Jedi Temple, and so it's expected that he would be awkward and stunted a bit in that respect. And so you can't expect him to understand, well, you can't do this because of this, because he's not socially acclimated.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I forget where I was. I had another jumping so close to relating to that. But yeah, I think when it comes down to that, he's really awkward. Just to put so much on him from a young age. Man, I lost the point that I was going to talk about, but it kind of had to deal with that. Oh man. Anyways, it was smart. It was really insightful, and we'll never know. But I mean, in addition to that, for however people feel about the prequels, there is some amazing new character designs that added to the world. The costume design, I love Padme's outfit so much, and the music is amazing. I mean, the Duel of the Fates is one of the best musical themes from Star Wars, I think, up there with Princess Leia's theme and all that. So for as much as a whole experience, it ends up being disappointing for some people if you're watching the 3 films. The kind of ripple effect from those movies has been a big deal, I think. And then it's even interesting to see the meta-textual, how unfortunately Jar Jar's actor was super, super bullied, but Daniel Logan, who played Baby Boba Fett, just loves everything about Boba Fett. But now Ahmed Best, who was Jar Jar, he was at the latest Star Wars celebration, and people are coming to have an appreciation, and it's just that whatever you feel about the character, it's oh my god, this was something that a man put work into, and Jar Jar almost seems like a reliable friend. I know some people find him extremely annoying, but it's just all these characters have been around now for so long, 20 years on some of these characters. It's just they feel like reliable parts of the universe.
You definitely form an attachment, and
attachments are forbidden.
Only Sith deal in absolutes. But they become almost a part of your life. And so I don't really understand the bullying of those actors and those people, but it's nice that with the passage of time and those kids growing up, that Ahmed Best is not so jaded and disenchanted with the whole thing.
I mean, even Hayden Christensen is I was Anakin. He's a super cool guy, and I'm sure Natalie Portman, in good humor, she did an SNL skit where they did the Natalie Portman rap part 2 from The Lonely Island, and it has one of my favorite jokes in it about say something about the prequels. There's some swearing. You should look it up though. It's very funny. But she got in a I know it's not the screen used version, but she face painted herself up as Padme, and she has good humor about it. I think that's the other thing is a lot of people, they acknowledge that some people don't like it, but it does mean something to other people. And there's at the end of the day, we all just want to love Star Wars, and this is a part of Star Wars that you can choose to love it or you can choose to prefer other things, but no one should hate on anyone for any other part of it because the galaxy is so vast.
Yes. And I really do think that if you watch Clone Wars and Rebels, it gives you so much more appreciation. The scene on Mustafar with Obi-Wan and Anakin. You see their relationship in the prequels, and it's fine. they have a perfectly lovely relationship in the second and third movie. But, in the first, he wants nothing to do with training him and doesn't think that they should take him on because he's too old. And you don't get the same brotherly, poking kind of relationship that they have in Clone Wars. And
oh, I remembered what it was, but please finish your point. I've got it in my head.
And so watching them fight and Obi-Wan having to take Anakin down after asking Yoda to not send him.
You were my brother.
And then yelling, you were my brother. Like, it's so much more emotionally moving. And if I keep talking about it, I could cry. It's not surprising because I cry at everything, but it gives you that context that makes everything more meaningful that you can't achieve in the movies.
Yeah. And so to go, you were talking about how Anakin was kind of awkward and stilted. The Clone Wars added an interesting foil to that with Obi-Wan and Duchess Satine of Mandalore. That was what it was. I was like, I have this image in my head, but I don't remember what it is. Duchess Satine of Mandalore. And you get to see Obi-Wan kind of have a relationship outside of like, and knowing all these like, ooh, like love is forbidden for Jedis, but like you get these rich stories and I can only hope that we get to see some of that type of stuff in the Obi-Wan series for Disney Plus. But that exploration of like, these guys had lives outside, like the Clone Wars was a really long time. They had a life outside of what we saw on the screen. And who wouldn't love the fact that Star Wars is saying, they're not saying, oh, no one liked those movies, better not to dig into that. It's like, hey, no, maybe we can draw out something that you do like. Like we'll find something because there's so many corners left to be explored. And I mean, in addition to the animated series, Marvel got the rights for the comics in, I want to say 2015. And since then, though they started with a main original trilogy set timeline between Empire, is it Hope and Empire? No, it was Empire and Jedi, I think. No, it had to be Hope and Empire. Anyways, the Marvel Star Wars, they did a lot of original trilogy, and that was their main storyline. But then they were like, we're going to do miniseries about Darth Maul. We're going to do an Obi-Wan and Anakin series. They've done a couple of one-shot issues with Padme, and they've done some stuff with Jar Jar. Like Jar Jar had a lightsaber at some point, I think. And then they've done an Ahsoka novel. They've done a Padme novel about her and her badass handmaidens, which, like, I'm sorry if you don't think that's the coolest operation. Like, you're wrong. Like, it's so cool. Like, and I wanted more of them because, like, Sabe and Dorme and all these girls who were like, we're going to put our lives on the line for our child queen and we're ready to be her decoy at a moment's notice. Like, that is so cool.
The novels are something that I really enjoy. The Ventress novel, Dark Disciple, is excellent. But I love Ventress.
Yeah.
And I really like that she's out for Ventress. And so if being Dooku's apprentice is the best thing for her, that's what she's doing. If she's, coupling with Savage to take...
Can we talk about also the coolest name in the Star Wars? Savage Opress.
Seriously. That guy is epic. And on that note, the Darth Maul, Savage, Ventress, and Obi-Wan fight.
Yeah.
There's just, I don't know. I'm just being a dork now. But
no, that's exactly what I wanted for this. I mean, Take what you will from hearing the word prequels, but it means so much more than just the original movies. And I think that's what this then and now is, because 20 years later, where are we? We've got so much rich lore, and people, if they don't love the whole movie, there's something from the prequels that they do love, and that's important.
Well, and I think what they've done with the comics and the novels is... I really liked Ahsoka. I really liked Ventress. I've read both of the novels that came out of the animated series. And I think you can find something that you love, and they've given you more opportunities to live it and experience it. It's not just, well, here's your 6 seasons of this person, and that's it. If you want more of them, just go watch more. Go watch it again.
Yeah.
You can read the book. You can read the comics. And I made a timeline, and since 2008, something has come out almost every year as far as visual media.
That's insane.
A show or a movie. And I didn't even touch the comics or the books because there's so many. Like, doing this is gonna cost me money because I found a bunch of new things that I need to read because I love it and I just want to consume more of the universe.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think as we kind of bring this to a close here, I know that any time you undertake a storytelling project where you're jumping behind the original story and you're trying to make it all fit, there's going to be places where it shows its seams and it doesn't always fit. But the fact that we've had the time and that there's been the continued interest, I think when it comes down to it, everybody just wants to love Star Wars. But Star Wars is also many different things to many different people. It depends on which era you came in, which princess you identify, princess, queen, which character, the smugglers, the bounty hunters, like who you love, what you think you would be doing in that part of the universe. Because at the end of the day, we all just want to love Star Wars, but everyone's definition of Star Wars means something different, and you can choose to interact with or not any parts of the story that you don't care for or love. I haven't read every single comic because I don't have the time or the money. But that doesn't mean I don't love Star Wars any less than I do.
Well, and not every character is going to be your favorite, which reminds me, neither of us mentioned Hondo in this entire half hour.
Hondo Ohnaka.
Which I'm ashamed of both of us.
Well, and I haven't even mentioned one of my favorite Star Wars stories, the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise. That's in conclusion. Also, one of the best things that the prequels have given us are prequel memes. Those are like next level internet
it's your
humor.
Jam.
Yes. No, but again, it's one of those things that, like, even those come from the parts of the trilogy that people like to make fun of, but we can do it in a safe and funny way and laugh about the droid attack on the Wookiees and like all these different mimetic materials that they give us. But then there's still the characters like Darth Maul, and you're like, he's epic. And then there's Padme, and it's like, what a great concept. And Anakin, and it's like, oh my God, that was a tragic story. And Obi-Wan, hello there, like, bring him back. Because that's the versatility of these prequels.
Well, and there's something for everyone. You can find something you love, because even if the story and the dialogue is not the most perfect thing that has ever been, it's still a great character. And there are other mediums that you can, go along on a journey with that character and enjoy it and, build your world of Star Wars. Because like you said, you can take what you want and leave what you don't.
Yeah. And I think ultimately people thought you were supposed to bring balance to the trilogy, to the saga, but they didn't. And that's okay. Whether or not these movies brought balance to the Force, the Star Wars prequels did introduce a number of concepts that, when explored outside of the limited scope of the films, have richly expanded the lore of the galaxy in deeply influential ways. From characters like Darth Maul to the legendary Clone Wars, the prequels are full of engaging stories, interesting characters, and unique concepts that have impacted the larger Star Wars saga, spanning the sequels and standalone films to the comics and animated television landscapes. Whether you love them or hate them, the prequels have made their mark on Star Wars fandom. Thank you for joining us. This has been the Star Wars Prequels, Then and Now. Do you enjoy listening to Then and Now? We are proud to bring you pop culture content completely ad-free, but that doesn't mean we don't need your support to help keep us going. Please take a moment to leave a 5-star review on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting platform and help spread the word about our podcast. We welcome fan feedback. Email us at podcasts@sideshow.com with your thoughts and suggestions for how we can make our shows even better. Plus, tune in for our full network of pop culture podcasts. See if your fan favorites make the cut in the Geek Culture Countdown, a bi-weekly podcast featuring pop culture top 10 lists. Hear exclusive interviews with celebrities and pop culture industry leaders as they let their Geek Side show in Look Who Showed Up. Join comedian Jeff May and his special guests as they discuss anything and everything in Sideshow's Sideshow. Then get all the latest pop culture news with our daily briefing, a 2-minute breakdown of the biggest geek headlines perfect for your Alexa or Google News briefings. We wouldn't exist without your continued support. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to let your geek side show.